how cute these turned out, and they're going to be so useful for frontline medical staff.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 45 of the So Not Scary series. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how I made this nurse's headband, which can be worn by frontline medics or anyone who is wearing a protective face mask all day long. And people who are wearing those face masks which hook behind your ears, their ears are getting bruised and sometimes leading to a lot of pain and discomfort behind the ears. So these are headbands which have got these huge buttons on either side of them, and they can help ease the discomfort and pain of wearing a face mask because you can hook the face mask behind the buttons instead of behind your ears. So yeah, stick around because we're going to see how to make this very quickly and very easily. Now, if you've seen any of my earlier videos, you will see that I'm kind of reluctant usually to recommend exact measurements for whatever project you're making. With this project, however, because I've now made a few of these headbands, I know that if you stick to these measurements, life will get a lot more easier for you rather than guessing and second guessing yourself. So the first piece that you need to cut out is 6 inches wide by 14 inches long, okay? So what I'm just gonna do is take my fabric, fold it in half lengthwise so I know I'll be able to make a nice vertical cut. And taking a ruler, this is a nice long ruler, that's my 14-inch mark. I'm just going to snip it there. And now I'm gonna take my rotary cutter and my quilting ruler, and I'm just gonna make a nice vertical cut. So that there is 14 inches long, okay? Now we need to make sure that it's actually 6 inches wide, okay? So what I can now do is fold it in half this way. Now I'll measure 6 inches this way, make a mark, and now I'll cut at that mark. Okay, so that's a nice strip measuring 6 inches wide by 14 inches long. The other strip you need is measuring 11 inches long and 2.5 inches wide, okay? So let's do that. Measure 11 inches, mark that position. And now this has to be 2.5 inches wide, okay? So that's now 2.5 inches wide and 11 inches long. Let's move on to the next step. The third thing that you will need is a length of elastic measuring 7 inches long. Now I'm using a length of black elastic, but really you can use any color because it's going to be encased within fabric anyway. So I'm going to just place it next to my ruler and snip it at 7 inches. Now we need to do a spot of ironing or pressing. So I'm going to take my fabric and fold it with the right sides facing each other lengthwise. We're going to repeat this with the smaller strip of fabric as well. Okay, so now we need to do a spot of sewing, okay? And I'm using a magnetic thread guide here because I just want to keep a simple, straight, narrow hem, okay? So I'm just going to start sewing, and what we need to do is just sew a nice straight stitch along that folded edge that we had ironed out, okay? Okay, now that this is stitched, we're going to repeat the same with the narrow strip of fabric as well. Okay, so our fabric strips have been nicely stitched down. So the first thing we need to do now is just give the seams a good press. So that's what we're going to do now. Okay, now that they've been pressed down, we need to turn them right side out. So this should be easy enough. I'm just going to do it with my fingers. With this, we might have to use a safety pin. This is how we're going to do it. Okay, now that this has been turned right side out, this is what we're gonna do. With the broad strip of fabric, we're gonna keep this seam or the stitch line down the middle and give it a good press, okay? And with the narrow strip of fabric, we don't have to keep the seam in the middle, we just have to push it to one side and give it a good press. So let's do that. Now after pressing, this is what it looks like. So the seam for the broad strip of fabric is down the middle, so you can see, okay? And for the narrow strip, it's pushed to one side of the fabric, okay? Now let's move on to the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're gonna take our safety pin and clip it to one side of the elastic and thread it through the narrow tube we've just stitched. Now, once you reach a point where the tail end of the elastic is about to disappear inside the strip, you just kind of tuck it in and make a sandwich. So inside you can see the elastic is on the inside, right at the edge, okay? And now we just have to tack it in place. So we're just going to sew a straight stitch down this side of the strip. I'm going to turn it around and sew back over my stitch line again. Now that we've stitched it down on one side, we're going to continue to thread the elastic through and repeat the same process on the other end. So once the elastic approaches this end, we're going to grab it and then tack it down, okay? Okay, so we're now ready to assemble our headband. So that is the elastic strip that we just finished sewing. That's the headband, and there's the seam running down the middle. We're going to flip it over, and that's the right side of the headband, okay? So now what we have to do is pick up our elastic, place it down the middle of the right side, okay? And then sandwich it or fold over the edges of the headband to wrap it, like so, okay? And now that this is done, we have to sew a nice straight stitch down this end. And I'm gonna go over this several times to make sure that it's nice and strong. Okay, here we go. Now clearly, as you can see, we will be sewing through several layers. So if you remember this video, you will see that we use our special trick with a sharp pointy thing to sew through multiple layers, okay? So I'll be pressing down on the presser foot using my pair of scissors to be able to sew through all those layers. Okay, here we go. We're going to repeat the same on the other end of the strip. So again, with the right sides facing, we're going to center the elastic strip in the middle, okay? Get all these ruffles out of the way. And fold it over once, twice, and now we're going to do several back and forth stitches here to keep everything nice and strong. Here we go. Okay, so that's all the machine sewing we will be doing. So now here's where the magic happens. When we pull it, the stitched bits get tucked inside these folds and the headband emerges. Perfectly beautiful. Okay, there we go. And that's your finished headband, okay? See how neat it is? Okay, now if you weren't making a button headband, you would stop here. You don't need to do anything more. But because we are doing a button headband to help frontline medics, we're going to attach a button on both the sides of the headband. So one on this side and one on this side. So let's do that. Okay, so we're approaching the final step of making our button headbands. And here in front of me, you'll see I've got 2 buttons. And these are fairly large sized buttons. You want to make sure that the buttons are large enough so that a band of elastic can kind of be hooked behind them, and that it doesn't pop out, okay? So I'm just going to take a needle and a thread, and I'm going to sew on these buttons, one on this side and one on this side, okay? Okay, so I'm just finishing off the second button. So there's one, there's the other one, there's your headband, okay? And when somebody wears it on their head, they can stick the elastic for their face mask behind these buttons rather than behind their ears, so that it's very comfortable for them. I hope you found this video helpful, guys, and that hopefully it gave you some ideas of how you can use your mini sewing machine to create really useful things if you just think a little bit creatively with how you're going to work around the challenges and limitations that this little machine has, okay? In the next episode, I was actually planning on opening up another mini sewing machine that I bought online just to show or just to see how it works and to figure out where the faults within the machine lie. But actually, while I was reviewing it, as you saw in my last video here, I discovered that actually there are several differences between that machine and my KPCB Tech mini sewing machine. There are very subtle differences, but I think it does make or affect performance or the ease of use. So in my next episode or in my next video, I'm planning on showing you guys what those differences are and whether it makes a difference to you whether you buy this machine or the other generic one. So yeah, do check out my last video as well, because there you'll see what a generic mini sewing machine looks like, which is unbranded. And then in the upcoming video, I'm going to compare that machine with my KPCB Tech mini sewing machine. And remember, I'm not sponsored by anybody. Nobody's paying me any money to say good things about one machine and bad things about the other machine. So it's going to be a very authentic kind of side-by-side comparison and a review of what differences there are and whether those differences actually translate into something meaningful when we are actually using these sewing machines. So yeah, do check out my next video and stick around because I'm going to show you some more photos of other headbands that I've made. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And yeah, ask around, ask your friends, ask your family, whoever is working in the front line who's wearing masks all day long, whether they could make use of something like this, because there are nurses and doctors that I know who are wearing these and it has helped them in the front line. It has kind of increased their comfort when they're working in such strenuous circumstances. So anything we can do to help them out, I think counts. We all have to pull together to see ourselves through this crisis. So yeah, I hope you found this helpful and I shall see you in the next video. Bye!